Ted had never considered himself a suspicious man. His work required precision, logic, and composure, and for years he had navigated complicated situations with a steady hand. But Eva's arrival had unsettled something deep within him, something instinctive, something he had trained himself to ignore. She had appeared in their orbit quietly, almost too quietly, as though she were slipping through the cracks of their lives rather than stepping into them. At first, he dismissed this unease as simple overthinking. But the more time he spent around her, the more the details of her story shifted, blurred, contradicted themselves in subtle ways he could not ignore. It began with small inconsistencies in the background she gave, places she had supposedly lived that had no record of her residence, references to people no one else seemed to know, moments when she reacted to certain names or events with too much familiarity, or not enough. Ted had always been sensitive to these silent irregularities. Patterns were the foundation of his world, and Eva disrupted them. Something about her mere presence created an invisible ripple in the balance he had spent so long maintaining. The decision to verify her identity came to him gradually. It was not a single moment of clarity but a slow accumulation of doubts stacked like stones across his conscience. Each day added another piece to the growing weight until he could no longer bear the pressure. He justified the search as precaution, as responsibility, as due diligence in a world too tangled with hidden motives to take anything at face value. But beneath this rational facade lurked a deeper motivation, fear. Fear that this girl, with her enigmatic expression and guarded posture, might be connected to a past he had fought hard to bury. Ted's investigation began quietly. He combed through public records, social archives, financial traces, anything that could confirm who Eva claimed to be. The results were ambiguous at first, filled with gaps that made no sense. Some records placed her in towns she could not possibly have lived in based on her school history. Other documents contradicted even her basic biographical details. The inconsistencies grew until they could no longer be dismissed as administrative errors. As he dug deeper, Ted sought access to older archives, files that required clearance most people did not have. His hands trembled slightly when he opened the first sealed folder, not because he feared the truth, but because he feared what the truth might demand of him. The name he searched for had been buried for years, locked away along with the memories of a man whose influence had cast a long, suffocating shadow over Ted's life. Yet as he cross-referenced Eva's fragmented identity with hidden records from decades ago, he began seeing connections he wished he had never found. The discovery came in the form of a birth certificate, one that had been redacted, misplaced, and sealed under an unrelated case file. The surname had been altered, but the parentage was unmistakable. Eva was not a drifter, not a newcomer without roots, not an anonymous figure quietly entering their world. She was Alan's daughter. Alan. The man whose destructive decisions had shaped Ted's past, the man who had manipulated, exploited, and betrayed countless lives, the man Ted had sworn never to speak of again. The realization struck Ted with the force of an earthquake. He felt the air drain from his lungs as he stared at the document, as though the page itself were mocking him, reminding him that the past he thought he had outrun was finally catching up. He felt an unexpected surge of anger, raw, sharp, disorienting. It was not directed at Eva immediately but at the universe itself for delivering such a cruel twist. The thought that she might be an unwitting victim, a pawn, or worse, an intentional extension of Alan's influence made his skin crawl. Every innocent moment he had shared with her now felt contaminated. Every kind gesture she had offered transformed into a potential strategy. The realization poisoned his memory of her, staining every moment with suspicion. Eva, meanwhile, sensed the shift long before Ted confronted the truth. She noticed the silence that seemed heavier around him, the way his eyes lingered on her a second too long, as if searching for patterns in her movements. She could not have known what he had discovered, but she felt exposed, scrutinized, pressed beneath an invisible lens. This change triggered something volatile within her. She had lived her entire life with secrets that pressed against the walls of her mind. She had grown accustomed to being looked at but not seen, known but not understood. Ted's quiet observation rekindled old memories of being evaluated, judged, measured against standards she never agreed to. A defensive sharpness stirred in her chest, mixing uneasily with fear. Ted's internal conflict grew each time he crossed paths with her. He found himself searching her expression for traces of Alan. An unmistakable hardness in the eyes, a cold tilt of the mouth, a calculated stillness in her posture. Sometimes he imagined he saw it, and his anger would spike. Other times, he saw only a frightened girl trying to navigate a world that had not been kind to her, and guilt would flood him so intensely he could barely breathe. The contradiction tore at him, leaving him in a constant storm of resentment, fear, and reluctant empathy. Questions gnawed at him relentlessly. Had she come to infiltrate their lives willingly, or was she running from the same legacy he despised? Was she aware of the damage Alan had caused? Was she continuing his work, or trying to escape it? Each possibility contorted Ted's emotions further, twisting him into a tangle of suspicion and compassion. He could not decide which version frightened him more, Eva the manipulator, or Eva the unsuspecting victim. His inability to reach a conclusion pushed him toward darker thoughts. He imagined scenarios where Eva was gathering information, watching their interactions, waiting for the right moment to reveal her true intentions. The paranoia unsettled him deeply. But whenever he tried to distance himself from her, he found himself pulled back by a conflicting sense of responsibility. If she was innocent, rejecting her would replicate the same cruelty he had once endured. If she was dangerous, ignoring her could destroy everything he had worked to protect. Eva, for her part, felt the walls closing in. She sensed hostility where there had once been neutrality, felt suspicion radiating from corners where people barely spoke her name. Ted's presence became suffocating. His silence pressed on her like a weight she could not shake off. She began questioning every step she took, every glance she received. Her past had already taught her to fear exposure, now it taught her to fear Ted specifically. She did not know what he had learned, but she recognized the growing coldness in his demeanor. Her instincts screamed that something life-altering had shifted between them. Eva began withdrawing into herself, avoiding spaces where she might be observed. Her behavior only increased Ted's suspicion. She moved quietly, almost strategically, and every action she took fed the narrative building in his mind. He saw manipulation where there was only survival. He saw planning where there was only fear. And Eva saw judgment where there was only confusion. Their mutual misunderstanding spiraled quickly. The more Ted tried to gather information, the more evasive Eva became. The more evasive she became, the more certain Ted grew that she had something to hide. Both found themselves trapped in a feedback loop of distrust neither could escape. Ted's emotional turmoil deepened as he began reviewing his findings again and again, hoping he had misinterpreted something. But the documents remained unchanged, as did the truth they carried. Eva was undeniably Alan's child. The bloodline alone made her a threat, even if she had done nothing knowingly. Ted hated himself for thinking this way, but he could not ignore the fear rising in him like a tide. If she carried even a fraction of Alan's ambition or cruelty, the consequences could be catastrophic. His anger intensified, not just at Eva, or at Alan, but at himself. He despised his hesitation, his confusion, his inability to separate instinct from reason. He despised the weakness that made him dread confronting her, the emotional entanglement he had allowed to take root. He wanted clarity, certainty, control, but all he found within himself was chaos. Eva, meanwhile, reached her breaking point. She felt hunted, cornered, and misunderstood. Secrets she had fought to keep buried began surfacing in her thoughts. Memories of Alan's influence, of her unstable childhood, of all the things she had run from, clawed their way back into her awareness. She had begun her journey in search of a life untainted by her heritage, a life where she could exist without carrying the shadow of her father's sins. Instead, she found herself drowning under the weight of suspicion she had hoped never to face again. Her fear warped gradually into something sharper. Anger stirred beneath her anxiety, ignited by the unjust scrutiny she sensed from Ted. She felt betrayed by someone she had begun to trust. She felt exposed in a world where she had always struggled to remain invisible. Her emotions twisted into a dangerous blend of desperation and resentment. As both of them spiraled, the psychological tension between them grew nearly unbearable. Ted felt as though he were holding back a dam ready to burst, torn between the need to act and the fear of making a catastrophic mistake. Eva felt as though the ground beneath her feet had vanished, leaving her suspended in a void where any wrong step could end her fragile stability. The truth, once uncovered, did not bring clarity. It brought chaos. Ted's discovery pushed him to a precipice where every choice seemed destructive. Eva's hidden identity pushed her into a corner from which escape required drastic decisions. Both were paralyzed by the weight of their intertwined fates. As the pressure around them tightened like a noose, neither could see a path forward that did not lead to emotional ruin. Ted's world fractured under the burden of old wounds reopened. Eva's world darkened under the inevitability of a past she had tried to flee. And as the unspoken tension between them swelled, it became clear that the truth had not set them free, it had trapped them both in a storm that neither of them knew how to survive.